CapitolView, where we discuss the latest in state government and politics. I'm Hannah Meisel with NPR Illinois. Joining us this week is Kent Redfield, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Illinois Springfield. Welcome back, Kent.
Good to be here.
And here for the first time is Mike Miletich, State House Bureau Chair for Gray TV. Welcome, Mike.
Excited to be here, Hannah. Thank you.
Well, this week we finally saw the official announcement of Richard Irvin, the mayor of Illinois' second largest city, Aurora, the first Black mayor of that city, announced for governor. We've been talking for weeks. It's been expected. We've been talking about this kind of interesting slate that, a group of moderate Republican political operatives, the folks who were kind of, behind Bruce Rauner 2014, Mark Kirk before that, folks who have a vested interest in, trying to keep Illinois Republicans, where they've been historically, and not lose more power within the State House. But Mike, tell us a little bit about this slate. What else do we know about it at this point?
I think the biggest thing that's stood out to people, obviously, this is a long time coming. It was rumored the fact that Richard Irvin would be the candidate for this slate that's being funded, pretty much considerably funded by one of the richest people, the richest man in the state of Illinois. And of course, that's Ken Griffin. It's funny, though, because a lot of people are looking at the past history here and seeing that obviously there's some Democratic decisions that were made, and many people consider Richard Irvin to be a Democrat. So he's already facing a lot of questions about who he is as a person. And, he's coming out really with strong words in some of his announcement video. I mean, he's saying that he is a police supporter and all lives matter, when he previously was Black Lives Matter when he was running for mayor of Aurora. But the other thing to note is that his running mate is Avery Bourne from downstate Illinois, Morrisonville, and clearly they had a strong matching there, so they'd be sure to look at the suburbs for Richard's case and downstate, because I think he's going to need a lot of help to gain some traction down here near Springfield. I don't know if people are going to be willing to jump on a train for someone that may lean to the right, to the left, a little bit like Bruce Rauner did back in the day.
Yeah, and Kent, I mean, you've been around Illinois politics for a long time. Have we seen something similar to this before? I'm racking my brain, and really the only slate I can, kind of think of, if you could even call it that, is the LaRouches. Is that, I mean, this is obviously not that, but has this been done before? And also, interesting to note that it's not a full slate of statewide candidates. They could not get someone to run for U.S. Senate against Tammy Duckworth.
No, this is pretty unprecedented. I mean, historically, the political parties, the Republican Party is kind of a statewide organization, and the Democratic Party is kind of an adjunct of the Cook County Democratic Organization, slated candidates and back those slates. And in this situation, you have a state Republican Party, you've got a state Republican chairman, Don Tracy, and yet you basically have political operatives associated with former Governor Ryan and the former, money man for Republican politics, at least half of the team of the money men for Republican politics for the last, 8 years, coming out with that, announcing a slate of candidates. And so it speaks to the dependence of the Republican Party on Ken Griffin's financing, because they're broke, and also to kind of the sad state of the Republican Party as an organization, as an entity, and we can overstate, how much the Democratic Party is kind of this unified, well-functioning machine and stuff, but it is pretty stark in terms of the contrast, and it's an interesting set of people that they put forward, to say the least. We should just to quickly note, we're talking about crime and corruption and fiscal responsibility is kind of the big theme. And so we've got a former U.S. attorney and state's attorney who's been slated to be the Secretary of State candidate, which in my less charitable moments, I would characterize as kind of a file clerk who also is in charge of the Department of Motor Vehicles. And then for the Attorney General, which is really the only office that you could talk about being crime-fighting, anti-corruption, we have, a person who is basically an international, trade attorney, has been an advisor to governors. And so it's an interesting collection of people, and all we've seen so far from, our press releases and the press releases from the slate are all basically cheerleading for Richard Irvin. So there's a lot of blanks to be filled in here.
Yeah, Mike, tell us a little bit more about, you mentioned obviously Avery Bourne, who's a kind of millennial Republican wonderkind, who has been a rising star in the party as Richard Irvin's running mate. But tell us more about who is on this slate.
Well, one of the interesting parts, you also have a younger lawmaker that will be running against Michael Frericks, and that's Tom Demmer. For people that don't know, he's been rising up in leadership in the House GOP caucus. And it's interesting to note that he was considering a run as well for Secretary of State, and looking in other ways that he could possibly move into a higher role. You look at the lawmakers that are leaving their spots, and this could certainly be interesting, because what if they end up in a position where this slate doesn't all go across and win in the primary? I mean, they lose their seat and they're relatively young. Do they come back to politics down the road? It's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens there. And we're also looking at the race for comptroller against Susanna Mendoza. It's interesting where you see someone that's coming out right off the bat talking about Mike Madigan, and looking at investigations that the comptroller's office has no control over. It definitely seems that in the messaging that's been put out there, which, mind you, this has only been press releases, none of the slate has talked to reporters at this point. Everything is catering to Mike Madigan, the machine. We're going to be tough on crime and address corruption in Springfield. But there's been no discussion of actual changes that will happen. And it's not, everything that's coming from the Republicans. The Democrats are also saying that this is the Rauner redo. And they're very much going with old talking points. So I'm curious to see what will happen in the next few weeks here.
Yeah, Ken, I think I asked this question on the program last week of our guests, but are we just doomed, to watch the same race and fights play out, again and again and again? Is Madigan versus Bruce Rauner, it was a very long 2-year budget impasse, and it was very long 4 years with them. I mean, I guess 5, you could say, with a campaign in 2014. But I mean, are we just doomed to see this whole fight play out again and again? This is the defining thing.
Well, I think, from the Democrats, they've already, you've already seen Pritzker's commercials. I mean, he's on the air. He's running about fiscal responsibility, about change, about the state going forward and progress. And so they're going to say, Mike who? That's old news. And why would you ever want to go back? I mean, we're back to Ronald Reagan running against Jimmy Carter. It's morning in America. Why would we ever want to return to those terrible 4 years that, we suffered through under, substitute Bruce Rauner for Jimmy Carter. And, and we've got basically the same theme. So, the Democrats are going to talk about, about all of the good things that they've done in terms of keeping people alive, balancing budgets, and just, this is all, noise in terms of the Republicans trying to find a theme. And, now there's no control over the pandemic. So we may, that may be back in a vengeance, who knows. The Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade. The pro-choice people in Illinois, those organizations, Personal PAC, are heavy hitters in spending on candidates. They've got a ton of money that they are going to roll out. And so, and the other thing is, one part of this, the imbalance is that the Republicans really don't have the kind of manufacturing money and the old base that they used to have within, like, the medical association. Now it's all hospitals, and we've got international trade, and the Democrats have a very stable base of union money, trade unions, service workers, state employees. So the Republicans have a real problem if they don't have a Bruce Rauner. Pritzker, for the Democrats, is, he's a luxury. He does his own thing in terms of funding the governor's race, and then they can focus on legislative races. There's no talk in all of this about how we're going to resurrect the Republican Party within the Illinois General Assembly. So, yeah, it does have some familiarity. The Democrats are going to try and say that, we don't want to tune to an oldies station anymore. Let's get, some new wave kinds of, themes going on here.
As long as we're extending this 80s metaphor, yeah, let's do that. But Mike, I mean, Richard Irvin in the slate of candidates is also, not the only Republicans in the game, but as Kent alluded to, in comparison, we saw the most recent quarterly reports filed this week, and the rest of the Republicans truly do not have that much money. Tell us a little bit about, what everyone has.
Yeah, right now it's a stark comparison, to see the amount of money that each campaign has. But keep in mind, some of these candidates that were out there for a while, talking Senator Darren Bailey, Jesse Sullivan, are saying that they'll be able to win without the support of these large Republican operatives. Darren Bailey, in his report, we saw made some very interesting decisions, spending a lot more recently than some may expect. And it's making him look as if he's not structurally sound in terms of budgeting. He came in negative. And it's interesting when you also look at the amount that Jesse Sullivan has, because he had a decent amount of donations going in. I mean, you're talking money coming in from California, people that he knew previously when he was younger. And that still has him sitting, at around the $11,000 that he had. And people are curious to see how long that could stick around, because is he going to be able to move forward? He doesn't have a running mate at this point. And clearly you're going to have the running mate in order to, move petitions and everything. Is that money going to go somewhere else at this point? And you're also looking at former Senator Paul Schimpf and his campaign, kind of on the lower end. Is he really going to step up with campaign fundraising? Important to note that for the Bailey campaign, they're really strong with small donations from supporters in terms of comparison to what's happening with large donors with other campaigns. And Gary Rabine, all personal donations to his campaign. But is that really going to stick well? He's been very silent, except for early on after he announced his campaign.
Yeah, I mean, Ken, you talked about the Ken Griffin money. He reportedly has vowed to spend, upwards of $300 million in this cycle. Of course, not all of that will necessarily be going to, the Irvin slate, but it's money to match, what Governor Pritzker, himself a billionaire, can and has dropped. I mean, last Friday night, the governor, it was reported he dropped $90 million more into his campaign fund. So clearly, it's going to be another grossly expensive race. We should also mention that Ken Griffin, he funded a lot of the Stop the Graduated Income Tax Amendment campaign that was successful. But there's another power player here in Illinois politics, and it's Richard Yulin. And he's someone who is definitely more of an ideologue than Ken Griffin, and his political donations have reflected that. For example, in 2018, after Bruce Rauner signed abortion bill into law, which surprised a whole lot of Republicans and really ticked them off. Dick Yulin, he funded Jeannie Ives' primary to the right of Bruce Rauner, one that was almost successful. But I mean, do you think that he is going to step in here and try to counter it and try to give his money strategically to someone who is more ideologically to the right? Or do you think he's going to sit with this one out? What do you think?
I view Yulin as being, more calculating in terms of, what's my best return on my money. This is definitely personal with Griffin. I mean, Griffin was, expressed, he was offended that Pritzker had somehow linked him to Bruce Rauner destroying the social service network within the state of Illinois. So it's very personal with Griffin, and he's plus, more than $20 billion. He can spend whatever he wants. Yulin is, has more money than Pritzker, I believe, but not, he is much more calculating. I mean, once you had Pritzker elected and the Republicans not having their act together, he had spent $10 million backing, Liberty Principles backing Republican candidates for legislature. 2 cycles in a row, he spent $10 million. Last cycle, he pulled the plug on it. And he's had no money in the game for at least 2 years. So, his name has come up as backing a Republican candidate, Missouri governor. His name has come up with the DeSantis campaign down in California. I really don't expect Yulin to get involved because he's interested in, what are my long-term successes? I'm not sure Griffin, he doesn't want people to raise his taxes, and he'd like to get back at Pritzker, but I don't know that he wants to be, king of Illinois politics. And so I don't expect Yulin to engage. And just, to quickly, in terms of the kind of money the Republicans have, Sullivan probably had the biggest fundraising, $11 million. Pritzker spent $170 million getting elected governor. Rauner spent $60 million trying to stay governor. That's $220-30 million dollars. And so when people are saying, I've got $1 million, I've got $11 million, that's, you just can't run, you can't run a statewide campaign that kind of money. Now, you could spend $500 million on the governor's race and probably not move the needle any more than spending $250 million on the race. But that's not going to stop. Griffin will spend whatever he wants to spend, and Pritzker will match him. And so, that's the reality of Illinois politics right now.
I mean, honestly, it begs the question, though, isn't there a limit for how much money is even practical? Because I mean, there's only so much TV time that you can buy, No?
Absolutely. You can't, it's not like, those last 8 mailers I got, I was on the fence, but this one really nailed it, and so, voters don't think that way. The problem is, what the pros will tell you, half the money on any campaign is wasted. We just don't know which half. And so, nobody wants to, not spend that extra little nickel that might have made the difference. It's going to be an interesting year.
Yeah, I guess at least they're job creators. Hey, Mike, one of the big themes, as you guys pointed out earlier, is going to be crime. Fighting crime. We have definitely seen an uptick in violent crime and also retail theft, organized retail theft during the pandemic. And it's obviously Republicans. This is a message that they're coalescing around, but Democrats too. I mean, we live in the same areas. It's not like the divide is geographically everywhere. In lots of areas people coexist, and it is a problem that all of us live with. But it's also it's something that House Speaker Chris Welch, in a round of interviews he did last week, he acknowledged that it is an issue and that he wants to see an anti-crime package of legislation this year. How do you think, though, how does he have to toe the line between doing that but also then defending criminal justice stuff that the Black Caucus passed last year, historic things, which, by the way, have, some things have not even gone into effect yet. Although those on the right have made it a message of, even if these things have not gotten into effect, it's the whole demoralizing thing where, this is why so many cops are quitting their jobs, et cetera. So how does he toe that line?
Well, I think it's going to be a very careful tap dance on where you go here. One of the things that Speaker Welch told me is that he wants to make sure there's more funding in the budget to specifically address the rise in violence, along with plans to tackle some of that rise in carjackings. And as you mentioned, the organized retail crime that's been happening so much because people are ordering online. What you aren't going to see is something that the House Republicans are trying to do, repeal the SAFETY Act. And for those that don't know, that was that huge Black Caucus package for criminal justice. And that's simply not going to happen. I mean, that of course, as Hannah alluded to, included in that is the changes to police reform that many people said that they were going to leave office. 2023 is when we're going to see some of the changes to cash bail. And so many people are assuming the fact that the rise in crime had to do something with that, but it hasn't even happened at this point. I think a lot of people are just seeing this and taking it as an opportunity to yell out that everything that happened recently is because of that bill. But they're definitely going to have some intense conversations. I will say that the lawmakers that are in charge of the committees to address this said we have to be civil when we talk about this, and Republicans and Democrats need to be heard.
Yeah,
go ahead, Ken.
No, I just, I expect you will get some legislation that is specific about, trying to flesh out risk assessment in terms of doing, eliminating cash bail so that, and you're going to get a piece of legislation that says, here are the things, here are the particular crimes and circumstances under which electronic monitoring would not be appropriate. And so they'll, and again, these are essentially perception, feel-good kinds of things. Nobody knows exactly how we're going to go about administering the risk assessment that's necessary to make pretrial confinement involve, efficient, effective decisions. Balancing, not locking somebody up for, a year who may or may not be guilty versus letting somebody out with an ankle monitor or a very high bail that isn't, that will go out and commit another crime. So, this takes a lot. This is going to be difficult to implement and take money and commitment. But it's a perception at this point. It's not, it's if people believe they're at risk, that's how they're going to vote. The reality is not as important as the perception.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Some economists kind of think it's a little bit different, but some economists think that a lot of inflation has to do with people's perceptions, and after a certain point, it doesn't matter, because when perceptions become reality or shape reality, then you have a new reality to contend with. But I feel like some of that's the same on the criminal justice bill. But hey, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank my guests, Kent Redfield, Mike Miletich. I'm Hannah Meisel, and we'll catch you again next week on Capitol View.